Hey, and we're live on the Expo live stream. In just a few minutes, we'll be talking today with Krzysztof Magiera from Software Mansion about Radon IDE. How's it going, Krzysztof?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing all right. We're going to let folks roll in for just a few minutes here. While people are rolling in, I was thinking about Krzysztof, you're in Poland. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, USA. It's cold where we are. I was curious, what's your favorite food or drink to warm up in these cold seasons?
I like more wine for drinking, or just like a milk with honey. Those are like the best drinks. And we are also in Poland very heavy tea drinkers, but it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tea that you have in a bag, so it's not like super fancy thing. But in any ways, like yeah, we use that a lot in the colder months. How about you?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I was like, what do I actually like to drink? And I'll tell you what I end up drinking. So it gets to like January. I'm working from home. I have my French press coffee. I always drink coffee every day, of course. That's my hot drink. But then I'll get to the point where I'm like, I don't really want more coffee, but I just need hot liquid. So I will just pour more hot water over the coffee grounds and I'll basically drink like brown coffee water. And it's like, to me, it's better than regular water. And I didn't get too much caffeine and I'm not freezing to death.
Yeah.
Yeah, curious
Yeah,
if anybody out there.
we have this joke in Poland where like people tend to drink like just hot water and then put a tea bag in the mouth. So this is a way to do it when you don't really have a cup.
I should try that instead. Yeah, curious anyone else out there in cold climates, how you're keeping warm. What kind of warm food or drink are you partaking in? I see Rob from Seattle. Seattle's, can get kind of cold, but not usually as cold as Cleveland or Krakow, I think. I don't know where anybody else is from, but yeah, we'll be getting started here in just a minute talking about Radon IDE. We're letting a few more folks roll in here. Probably get to about 3 after the hour before we get going. Yeah, so you guys getting the
Glühwein.
end?
That's what I see now in the chat.
Oh, is that a drink?
Glühwein.
Or
It's like it's a mulled wine, right? It's like a
Oh, okay,
German
okay. Got it,
version of it
okay.
with like a spices and stuff.
It sounded like a greeting to me, like gluing, like salutations. From Spain. Spain could be warm. Spain could probably be cold too, though, as well. California can be literally anything. Tampa, probably not cold, but maybe they like hot coffee anyway, hopefully. Alrighty, yeah, so it's about 3 after the hour, so we'll get started here. Thanks everyone for joining the Expo live stream. We have Krzysztof Magiera, co-founder at Software Mansion, here to talk to us about Radon IDE, the IDE for React Native. So yeah, Krzysztof, tell us about yourself and tell us about Radon.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a co-founder at Software Mansion, and I've been involved in React Native ecosystem for quite a while now. So I actually started working on React Native when the project was still not even launched publicly. I worked at Facebook back then. It was like 10 years ago. So I was on the initial React Native team that built React Native, and I was focusing on Android version at first. And then after leaving Facebook, 2 years later, I rejoined company that we actually started before I even went to Facebook. And yeah, we started. I mean, our company is like a software agency, so we do consulting software services for our clients. And we started using React Native as a technology to build the apps, and also since my times at Facebook, I already interacted with a lot of people from the community, so I got to know a lot of folks as also from Expo team, and that's how kind of our collaboration started, and we started working together on porting some native capabilities to React Native, especially in the fields that were really lagging. So So one was animation and gesture. So that's how we sort of started making those open source projects here at Software Mention, and we created the first React Native gesture handler. We built a native driver for animated, the React Native API. Then we built reanimated screens and some other libraries. So we currently maintain I think 5 or 6 libraries. So that would be like reanimated, gesture render, screens, SVG, and there are a couple of others. And yeah, so we have a big open source team at Software Mentions. I'm kind of overseeing that the work of that team. And we're building things for open source. We collaborate with Expo. So yeah, that's about myself, I guess. And yeah, and recently
Awesome.
we took on this new project that we actually started last year, which is now known as Radon IDE. Was previously known under a different name, was just React Native IDE. So that was the least creative name that we could have figured out for the thing that we're building. And yeah, so this like this stems from listening to people's feedback, people who use React Native, and that actually also wanted to reference now the State of React Native survey that just started yesterday, actually. So if there's anyone here who haven't yet filled the survey, I highly recommend to do that. Because this is the way how we learn about like what people are struggling with, like what libraries they're using, what kind of issues they have, and we're running now the survey for the 3rd year in a row. And in the 2 past years, the biggest struggle for people that we learned from the survey is we actually kind of expected that already, but it was basically like DevTools and debugging. There's lack of proper developer tooling for React Native, and that's like where the whole idea for building Radon came to be. Yeah, you wanted to say something? I interrupted.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, no, actually, it's really cool to think about that. I remember, I've been a mobile developer for a while, before React Native, and I got my start in Xcode, and I don't know if I'd call Xcode a good IDE, but like it's an IDE in terms of like you can have this close integration with like the screen you're working on, the debugger, and all these things. And React Native has felt a little, disconnect in that sense. It's kind of nice in some ways that we have these like series of small tools that you work with. We have like a text editor over here. You can use which one you want. We have a debugger over there, and you can mix and match. But then you're often kind of left with, if it doesn't quite connect correctly, or it doesn't do the things that you might have been used to when you're working in Xcode or Android Studio, or even before that, if you've been used to like, big Visual Studio and working in, the visual form editors and those things there. It feels sometimes like a downgrade when you're going to like, I have all these cool capabilities in terms of my programming toolbox, but I don't have this great, kind of control panel to interact with it. So yeah, it sounds pretty exciting to me to have a more integrated IDE. Yeah, I guess so you guys' motivation was coming a survey, and of course also Software Mentions, as you've mentioned, has been invested in the community and furthering React Native as a whole through open source. Yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense in some ways to dive into this whole new area.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying is also like kind of a motivation behind that. So I also have a background in iOS and Android native development. So when you're building for Android or iOS, you always use the IDEs. So for iOS, use Xcode. For Android, use Android Studio. So there are like just a few people who really don't use those IDEs for their platforms they're building for. And like even before that, I actually used to work with Flash technology, and there's also the Adobe IDE for this, which was really nice and helpful in many ways. So I'm kind of also a hardcore terminal guy, but not as much as using the editor that's embedded in the terminal. So So yeah, I think it's really convenient, especially for people coming from different backgrounds, that they really need to learn a lot in order to start building with React Native, because they don't just need to learn React, then React Native, which is, and a lot of people coming to React Native actually know React already. So this is like the first step. They know React, they want to build native apps, but then they learn that you have like completely different components that you need to use, and that they have different constraints, different way of styling them and stuff like that. So that's the first kind of step on the learning curve. And then you learn that you actually need to also learn the whole tool chain of native development in order to install the SDKs for Xcode, install simulators, whatever, and certificates and stuff like that. So Expo is doing a great job with this, so simplifying a lot of pain points in that area, and just having like a IDE that integrates all of those steps and makes it very simple for people to just open it and start coding. It's just like another step towards better developer experience and just more seamless developer workflow.
Yeah, that actually had me thinking of, before I ask this question and before we get into the demo, I just wanted to mention to folks, if you have questions about Radon IDE, please post in the chat. We're here to take your questions today, of course. And I'm sure if you have any questions about software mentions, open source projects in general, Krzysztof has some perspective there, of course, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. So please fire away with your questions, and we'll be sure to get to them throughout the live stream. But thinking about like the platforms that started with the IDE, like Xcode, Android Studio, and then a platform like React Native, you have this whole like set of like disconnected tooling that's already there, and you have to like put it together in a way, and you have to continue to work nicely with it. It's not just like thinking in the case of like Windows Forms or something like that in Visual Studio. It could just be like, well, when Visual Studio is the way you're going to build a Windows form, and if it's not even going to work outside of that. No, everything in a React Native IDE has to work with the tools that are already there. So I was kind of curious, like, how do you start to put that together? Like, how do you I don't know, divide and conquer, or how do you yeah, I don't know. How do you start to put those together in a way that doesn't create something new that would be incompatible with the rest of it?
Yeah, so that's definitely like the hardest problem, because what we really want to build is that for this tool to be very easy to use, so that it doesn't really require configuration or any sort, unless you just have like a very complicated setup for your project. But ideally, you open a project with it, and then it builds and runs stuff. So we're dealing with a lot of configurations, and we're still not yet there where we can say that confidently that it will just work on any setup. So it's still a long journey, but we have a pretty good compatibility. We actually have on our website, we have a compatibility table where we list different setups that we have tested, and we actually have like a repo with 10 or even more different projects with different settings used with different monorepo setups. So those tend to be like very tricky to get right. But under the hood, we just trying to use whatever the tools are doing. So we use Expo CLI for Expo projects, and we use React Native CLI for non-Expo projects. So we kind of call into those existing tools, but there are also some ways we need to inject things into the setup, and this is like the place where often things could break. So like, for example, we're so one thing that we wanted to make it so that, and when you start a new project, you have you start a new React Native project, and you do Expo start whatever, then it tries to bind it on port 8081, right? And then when you have another one in another tab, then you have a port conflict, and this port conflict needs to be resolved, and you need to select different port, and then actually the port information is kind of embedded inside the application. So when you change the port, it needs to rebuild, and only then it will actually launch the second project if you have like custom port. So we figure out that since everything gets integrated, we control the whole flow. We could make it so that the metro will actually start on an ephemeral port, so it will just choose a random port, and then we make it work. So we actually will hook into the other things such that it actually launches on, fully like on an ephemeral port. We never will have a conflict, even if you're running your app from a terminal and then you have IDE open. It should never conflict because it would just run on its port that is never going to be conflicting port with like whatever you choose.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that too. Like, what if I'm doing a bunch of stuff on the side and then I just open Radon and
exactly
to do some other stuff for the same app? Cool. Yeah, so I guess I should let you get into to showing it off here because it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw a question about cursor. So I actually have cursor open. Someone asked, we can show the screen actually, because for people installing it from cursor, it is available in the marketplace. So with the cursor, the situation is a little bit tricky because cursor is a fork of VS Code, and while VS Code is on a MIT license, the marketplace is not actually on a MIT license. So Cursor, as a fork, it actually has its own kind of implementation for marketplace, which looks almost identical to the one in VS Code, but it doesn't have the same data there because they actually, I don't know how they do that, but they perhaps just like crawling the actual marketplace and then download the packages and republish them under their own. So when we publish to the VS Code marketplace, there is always a significant delay in the time before this version is available in Cursor in the marketplace. But now it is available here, so it should be like version 1.0. So when you go to the marketplace here and you type in Radon, yeah, that's another good aspect about the name change, because before it was like React Native IDE, and you can't really. Yeah, it was hard to find anything there. Like now it's actually positioned on the top, so because it's installed, perhaps, I don't know. But anyway, so it's there. But oftentimes when we publish updates, it takes like a day or even sometimes like day and a half before it propagates to the marketplace here. So that's something that people who use Cursor needs to have in mind. If we are publishing updates and they want to use newest version, they can always just download it from GitHub. We also publish packages on GitHub, so you can download this VSIX package, and then you drag and drop it onto this panel here, and then it installs the newest version. But anyway, so this is Radon. When you open it, when you open a project, it starts. You can open this panel right here. So I can actually maybe close it. Yeah. So what we do is that we add this Open IDE panel button that you can use to launch it, or there's like a command Radon IDE Open IDE panel, and then it launches. You can actually use it in different settings. So you can use it as a editor tab. So this way it's kind of embedded here. I started using the mode where it's actually in the side panel, and specifically it's pretty convenient because when it's here, it's kind of, when you open things like the logs, for example, then it takes a space and makes it this part smaller. So I think for me the optimal configuration now is for this to be here. I'll be showing some other options. So when you start it for the first time, you will not have any simulator and emulator created. There is this menu right here that you can click, and then you can manage devices. You can create new simulators. So for this, you select a type. So there's like different. Those are mainly just like skins for the frame and the shape of the frame, depending on that. And then you can choose the system image. So we actually need to have that installed. So for now, Radon requires you to have Android Studio installed, which is used to download the system images for Android. And then you also need to have Xcode for the system images for iOS. Then you can select the system image that depending on what you have installed, and you can create it. I'll just use the one that we have created here, and you let me. Oops, I messed something up, I think. Or I can just switch to this other device. All right, let's see if this one works. I might have messed something up while switching the windows.
So I thought it mentioned somewhere that that Radon sets up its own like emulator instances, or does it use some of the, like if you open simulators, would you see the same ones?
No, so those are like completely separate. So we
Okay.
have a separate set of device instances, and the reason is for this to make it also easier for us to manage. And in case you're doing something on the side, you're installing it on your simulator that you're using. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and try to open it again because I have messed something up while switching between the devices, I'm assuming. Yeah, I hope it really loads this time.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good to actually kind of keep those separately, as you mentioned. So it doesn't,
Yeah, so
in theory, you could have them open on the other window, and what would happen there if it even worked?
Yeah, so the main reason is that such that it doesn't interfere with your regular workflow that you might have with your app already, because when you have your own kind of set of simulator, then the app that you have installed there might be configured to use 8081 port, for example, and then this will actually cause issues.
Oh, right, yeah.
To see why is it not booting, I'll maybe try to open a cursor again. Oops, this is actually a different project. I can open this one as well. Oh no, there is a new update. So this is why it's actually taking so long. I don't know what's that. Let's have this running. Okay, maybe we can try another app that some people already know. This one doesn't use the Expo Go. Did you guys just publish a new Expo Go update?
I think that's the screen that actually pops up when it's streaming like an update to the bundle, maybe. Was that running Expo Go or a development build?
Yeah, I can actually open it on the side and see why is that loading. Yeah. Just open it here.
I did notice when I was playing around with it one time, like I had to, like you just did, you clicked on it and you saw the screen, and my app was actually like, I clicked on it to load up in the development build, and then everything started working correctly in Radon after that.
All right. Yeah, let me see. Test it now. I just had it running.
So also, if any folks have any questions about Radon IDE or Software Mansion open source, or heck, anything React Native, Krzysztof's been around all those things. So please hit us up with your questions in the chat, and we'll be sure to answer as many of those as we can. So far as I understand it, there is a Windows beta, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I don't know if you guys have Linux on the horizon there or not for Radon IDE.
Yeah, so actually just merged, I think it was yesterday, someone contributed patch for Linux support. So this is not something we currently have like a capacity to really maintain, and there's still some compatibility issues. Yeah, I don't know. I use VS Code and it opened So we'll stick to VS Code then.
Okay, there we go.
Instead of cursor.
That was actually the difference. I'm thinking about it now. When I was opening up this morning, I realized I was opening up in Visual Studio Code now and not cursor.
Yeah.
Which is easy mistake because they look pretty similar.
Yeah.
Yes, Tom.
Yeah. So as for Linux, we just got a patch from one person who contributed that. So thank you for this. And then so the next update we'll be publishing a beta version for Windows and Linux, and the regular version for the Mac. What is very nice is that the patch wasn't like really huge. So it was only a couple of places that we already knew that are platform specific. So mainly around the resolving paths and stuff like that. So hopefully this will work for people, but we don't really have a good way of currently supporting folks who are on Windows and on Linux, because we just don't use that on ourselves. So I think the best part about the projects that we're building for React Native is that everything that we build, we actually have a first-hand experience in using those things. So we use libraries like React Native, all that stuff, and then we also use Radon on Mac, but we don't have first-hand experience of using this on Windows. So if anyone is here who'd be willing to show me how they develop on Windows or Linux, and how things works there, and like that, I'll be very interested in learning this, because I haven't really met anyone actively developing on either of those platforms. So
I was about to volunteer for the Windows part because I do a lot of my free
time
React Native development in Windows, but I also handicap myself by buying a Windows on ARM computer, and it doesn't support Android emulators yet. So I won't get a lot of usage out of Radon IDE yet, because that whole panel won't work until Google goes ahead and fixes that.
Yeah. So going back to demo, I finally got it to work. Not sure what was messed up in cursor, but we're back. And yeah, so here are some handy options for things like changing the text size. So this is something that it's very convenient to have it, under a single click, because then you can actually see how different people have different set. I can actually zoom everything in to make it bigger.
I totally missed that menu when I was exploring the other day. Is that oh wow, okay, sorry, go ahead. I have so many questions about that menu. That menu is really cool.
Yeah, so you can also change location. I don't actually have it in the demo. You can just put any kind of format for the coordinates, change that. I also have, this is pretty nice when you're developing things that requires users permissions and you want to test it. So like, for example, you're asking people for permissions to get the access to the user contact book, right? And then when you test that, then like once you agree in your simulator, then you're kind of done, and you cannot really retest it unless you uninstall and then install it again. And there are some commands that you can run if you find them, but this is here available under the single click, so you can just reset the permission for contacts, or just reset everything. And then next time you open it, then it will ask for this. Yeah,
that's where my eyes immediately went to. I was like, that is such a good feature.
Yeah. What else? So I actually have this usually turned off. And we also have the option to just show the touches. So this just shows this thing here. And those are actually also included in the recordings. And then we also have this switch here for, it's called replace. So this is like this functionality that allows you to, when you do something on a screen, then you can click on this thing. And this will show you, few last seconds of the thing that just happened on the screen. So this is helpful in the cases where you click on something, you don't know what you clicked, and then you cause an error. And so this way you can kind of learn what just happened on the screen. So this actually, depending on what you do, it can make a recording up to 30 seconds even. I think this is too tiny and doesn't show the progress of the video. But when things are happening on the screen, then this will basically, you can also use those arrows to just see the step-by-step animations here.
Oh, neat. When I first saw this feature, do you ever play the Prince of Persia for PlayStation?
No, I play the vintage version of Prince of Persia.
Oh, okay. So the Sands of Time version, it had the whole gimmick was that you had a little hourglass and you could like press a button and it would use the sand of the hourglass to send you back in time. And when I saw this feature, I was like, this is like the Prince of Persia Sands of Time, like, React Native IDE feature.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so we also have the Explorer integration, which just shows you, different routes you visit. So depending on, you click on different names. You can also use this bar to jump to the certain screen. So this is also helpful when you're using Explorer. But this URL bar is also helpful even if you're not using Explorer, because we have this other functionality that is called previews. So the previews is actually the original thing where the IDE started. So this was the first thing we wanted to build. And the previews is like an extra package you can install. You don't actually need to have this in your code. But if you want to use previews, then you install this Radon IDE package, and then it has the preview function. And preview, you can use preview to render anything, any component, and you do it just like this. And then Radon IDE recognizes the call to preview and gives you this button over here. And when you click it, then it shows a preview of this component, which allows you to iterate on this component in isolation. So whenever you change something here, like remove an emoji or something, then it will update this component. So if you have a very complex app and you are iterating on certain screens in isolation, this is very helpful because then you can kind of have this way of just like displaying individual components on the screen. So when you use preview, then this URL bar is also active. So it shows you like which preview you selected, and you can also use it to go back to the main app. So when I'm showing this to people, they often ask about storybooks. So we actually have the storybook integration as well, which works in a similar way. So when you have storybooks, stories, then you also get this button here. So there is nothing extra that you need to install. The IDE automatically recognizes the project that it uses storybook, and then it installs proper bindings, and it gives you this kind of buttons here that you can use to preview stories. So you can switch between different stories. So you have kind of the same functionality as with preview. So you don't really, if you're using Storybook already, you don't need the preview package, and it's often also very convenient to just have Storybook because it also has functionality about providing arguments for your component and stuff like that. So this is pretty helpful, and this is something that preview doesn't have.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, the URL bar, I was really stoked about, having done an Expo router workshop recently, and a lot of that was like telling folks, okay, this is what we need to test all these different like deep links in here and make sure they work all these different ways. And the typical cope was to be like, okay, this part we're going to work on in the browser. We're making a universal app, so we'll just go in the browser here because it's easier to manipulate the URL bar. But here you can do it with your app just the same, which is really neat. And I like how it has the history. Like it looks like that's organized by recent history in there. So it's got your previews mixed in there and which routes you recently went to.
Yeah. So it has recently used, it's here, and then the visited, it's like a full history. It's just cropped.
The storybook.
Yeah, this is storybook is as SB. Yeah, SB is the storybook thing. Yeah, and then it shows. It has to figure out some name for this because when you create a story, you don't actually assign any name to it, so it's kind of takes the name from I don't know, from the name of the variable actually, because this is how Storybook I think uses it. Uses also the variable name to display it in the sidebar where you have the whole Storybook UI running in your app.
I think Sophie had a question related to the storybook or previews. For developing components in isolation, does it work if the component relies on search params to fetch and display data? So I guess this would be like, to what extent could you do like asynchronous fetching within a preview?
Yeah, I mean it's basically the preview that you have. It's essentially, it creates like a separate root view component for this. So if your component relies on some external things being provided, they actually need to be also provided. So this is something we'll still like figuring out what the best approach could be for this. So one idea that we have is that we could, if you are using Expo Router, then you kind of have the layout defined, so we can sort of use the layout that Expo Router is using for displaying the preview, and this layout should already have things like all the context providers that your app might be using, right? But this is not done yet. So when you actually have this requirement, then so what we typically do in a project is we have this shell component that we defined, and we actually call it shell, and then we have some component that we call shell, and then it has all the context providers that your app uses. And then it renders, children. Oops, it's be like this. Yeah, and this won't actually work because I don't have those context providers here. But then what you do is inside of the preview, you just like wrap it in the shell like that, and then it gives you, it makes it so that the component here can use the context providers now, right? And then we actually use shell also for the main app. So this is like a main kind of component that we use as an entry point, or like a kind of root view that has all the providers that the app uses.
Cool.
Yeah, so another feature that we just saw is the integrated debugger. So debugger is just connected by default. You don't need to do anything extra. It's just like it's connected when you launch the app. And what debugger is also using is it gives you also the on-code exceptions. So instead of having the red box, you just jump immediately to the code which is causing the problem. And this is like the property shell doesn't exist because I saved it. If I remove it, then I can tap on here, and then it will just run. So this is for exceptions. Whenever you made an error, there was an exception. Instead of showing the red screen and then showing the stack, it just will stop and jump to the place in the code where the error actually happened. You will also get it printed in the console. I'll be showing the console in a moment. So maybe let's check the debugger now. So this is this button here that you can click, and another functionality that I often use is the element inspector, which is here. And when you click on it, then you can hover over elements and then see each individual element dimension. So this is very similar to element inspector you would have when you're like developing on web. So you can hover over elements, you can click on things, and then it just jumps to the right place in the code. So you don't need to search for this component name or whatever. It just like jumps to the place where the component is defined. And we also have this other option where you right click anywhere on the screen, and then it shows you like a mini component hierarchy of elements. So this is like the topmost element that I clicked. This is the parent, this is its parent, and so on and so forth. So you can actually go down to the root view actually here. And then you can also click on any of those items here. So this way you can kind of track the component hierarchy of elements. So this was in the flat list, and now it moved to the animated view, or the innermost element is just this one that I clicked on. So this is very helpful when you're like exploring like a existing code base. And if you want to see like how this button is implemented, for example, what I would do now is I just hover over it, I right click it, and then this is SVG element. So this one actually might be interested. No, it's not, because it's just like an SVG path. So I'll just go here, and as you can see, this is the press handler for this button here, right? So I can put a breakpoint here, and then when I click on it, and we'll just stop here. So what happens when you are in a debug and it's paused, then you get this overlay such that you don't accidentally try to make changes and then see and then try to interact with the app that is just not going to work. So you have this overlay, you can do the step over thing, and you can just like make it work. So of course things like you can do just delete code and it will fast refresh. That's kind of the normal stuff that people are used to already. What else we have is that we have this console over here. So it shows a number. So this is actually collecting the logs that you haven't viewed. And so this kind of replaces the console bar that's kind of overlaying over the view, and it's integrated in the VS Code. So when you have something here, then you also get links to the code that printed it. So you can just go to the exact line that printed the code, right? So this is convenient because I often put a lot of console logs. Even though I have debugger working, I still use console logs for a lot of things because many times it's much more convenient because you don't necessarily want to pause execution.
And then I know I end up with I forget where I put that console log. So
yeah,
if it doesn't tell me, I'm just searching my whole project for where did I put console log.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, so there is another there's another breakpoint that I had put here. I'll remove that, but then I just wanted to show that you also get the preview for objects here. So whenever it gets printed, you can preview it here instead of just being formatted in some way. So that's convenient in case you have like a structured data, so it's easier to navigate. And of course, when you're paused in debugger, you can also preview the variables. So they're available in this tab over here. I can actually show it now, but yeah, I don't really have any variables here, so I can define something. Yeah, so if I put a breakpoint here and then tap this button, then you have the local variables that you can preview in this is like a regular debugging window for VS Code. So you have like variable, and then of course the stack trace. Yeah, what else?
Ooh.
What else can we show?
Yeah, I recall there was some native logging or debugging features. I wasn't sure. I'm remembering something related to native code.
Yeah, so this is something I was demoing at JS conference, but this is not something we yet fully integrated. So this is not part of the IDE just yet. So I was actually demoing an option where you have the debugger connected both to JavaScript and then also to the native code. So this was in a demoable shape back then, but kind of our main priorities for the past couple of months were stabilizing this, making sure that it works in different configurations. So that's kind of the reason why it's still not ready. And I also feel like it's not something that a lot of people would use because people who work with native code, they would more likely just use the IDE that is appropriate for that language. I don't know a lot of people who use VS Code for iOS code. So
that's a good point.
But yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, it's cool. It's still getting working on though.
Yeah, and another thing that I feel like not a lot of people notice is that when you're just building on iOS simulator and you have text input things, then you have this option to either just show the keyboard, the virtual keyboard, or you can make it so that it's like a hardware keyboard connected. And when you have the hardware keyboard connected, when you tap on things, the keyboard will disappear as I was just showing, right? So when you're using, like, people tend to just have the hardware keyboard connected because it's more convenient to type on the keyboard rather than click on things here, right? And because of that, when you have the hardware keyboard connected, you don't actually see the keyboard on the screen, which means that you're kind of missing on the fact that the keyboard that you have in your app, it's covering a ton of content of your screen.
Mm-hmm.
And then people would realize this fact only when they start testing on the real device that, hey, this UI is not really, prepared for having a keyboard overlay because it's like the keyboard's taking too much space and you don't really have a way to see what you're typing really. And often sources of errors is that people just don't have the keyboard visible, and we actually managed to work around this in the IDE. So now in the IDE, when you are like typing on the keyboard, you actually this won't disappear, so it's kind of kept on the screen the whole time.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I always
Can I try the
mess that up
Android?
for sure.
Yeah, I'll try emulator. Someone asked to try Android, so we're trying Android.
Yeah, how many times I put the keyboard up because I'm like, oh, I know I need to check my keyboard avoidance, and then it just went back down again because I just started testing something else.
Yeah, if you press any screen in iOS simulator, it just like hides the keyboard. Yeah, I don't feel like it's like super practical to behave this way. I don't know why they decided to do it this way, but
I don't know why Apple does a lot of things they do.
That's interesting. So it looks like the Expo Go crashed on Android. Let's see if it works on another emulator. Yeah, so basically same stuff. Also the debugger is working. You get the same functionality on Android. We have previews as well. The replay, sorry. It's like super interesting. You click on things here, just shows the replay, so you can save the replay as well from the panel. I think this needs to be adjusted a little bit because it covers a lot of the display, really. Yeah, and on Android you also have. Yeah, on Android there is. Yeah, this issue doesn't actually exist on Android, so Android doesn't have this stupid thing where it hides the keyboard. So that's not going to be interesting because you have the same on the stock emulator.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed we had a couple questions of folks asking about development builds. I found this functionality earlier when I was testing it out, but I wonder if you could show us the how you tell it to use a development build versus Expo Go.
Sure. So for this, IDE doesn't really have any built-in options to manage your project. So if you want to use dev client, I understand that's what you're asking for, then we will actually need to turn this project into dev client project, right? And how you do that in Expo, I think you need to install.
Yeah, install Expo dev client.
Install Expo dev client. You do it like that. All right. So let's try it. It will take a little bit longer now to build once it's installed. So we installed the dependency. And yeah, so another neat thing is that whenever you change something that requires native changes, IDE actually keeps track on that. And then it shows you this banner here so that you, like another frequent error that I'm having often when I work with a team is that I pull in some changes from Git, and then I end up in a state where actually I'm trying to refresh JavaScript, but I actually need some native changes to be rebuild basically. So when in IDE you have this panel, so I just installed like another dependency, and it just says that native dependency change and you need to rebuild. Or you can actually ignore that, but we want to rebuild here. But it may take a second because now it actually will need to run the whole development build.
And I guess there's two different scenarios here. There's like building a development build locally, but if you already have a development build, there's that launch.json file, I think is what I ended up configuring. I was able to put my EAS development build profile in there and actually pulled my latest development build. from EAS?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, so when you so EAS is going to be more complicated, I think, to showcase right now, because I don't.
Yeah. I wouldn't mean. Yeah,
I don't
wouldn't expect
have
you to show the
the
whole thing.
I don't have the setup. But if you go to the docs, I'll just put it out here, and then so we have some options for AIS build. So if you have like a very custom configuration, you can add additional config files to configure the IDE. So some common options that people may use with this is configuring the iOS build scheme if they have it different than the default one, or the one that, if there's like just one, then we'll pick the one that's there. But if you have custom schemes, then you may need to configure it here so that it chooses the right scheme or the build flavor for Android. But we also have settings for EAS. So we have this build command thing. And if you use EAS, you can just put like an EAS command there, and it will fetch the build from EAS. So the thing is that with EAS, you don't really have a way of, or at least I'm not familiar with it, maybe to the extent that I can tell whether it's an option, but you don't have a correct association between the current code version and the EAS build you should use. So when you use EAS, you have an option to, just give me the most recent build. But the most recent build doesn't necessarily need to be the right one for this version that you're using, because you may be on, some older branch, and you actually may not want to use the newest EAS build, right? I think for this to work, because I was getting an error here, so it says I should do the pre-build. So I'll actually need to also do the pre-build, because it doesn't have a way of figuring it out. Oops. Oops. And we'll do it for Android. Yeah, so now hopefully this will start in the dev client project. And yeah, so of course, if you have AIS, then there is always this configuration option that you can use to specify that it should use EAS command to fetch the build. But then you actually need to specify some resolution algorithm, or just a way whether it should use the latest build, or maybe some people I know that are actually storing hashes of the builds. So whenever they make a build, they store a build hash in the repo, and this way they referenced, hey, you're using this version, you have it in version control, you should use this build with this hash. So there's always the way to do it this way.
Yeah, but if you are generally using your latest development build, which I think is pretty common, like it's just setting that profile in that launch JSON.
Yeah. So by default it uses the latest, right?
Yeah.
But as I was saying earlier, this may be problematic in case there are frequent changes being made, and then you're on some older branch that doesn't really have a way of telling like which version you should use, and then maybe that the latest version may not be appropriate version to run it. Yeah, so we have the progress bar. It's actually sometimes it doesn't show an accurate value because it's because the number of things to build changes over time. Once you build, you discover more things to build. So it was on 90%, and now it just jumped back to 10. But this is the best we can actually show for the moment. We don't have a better way of showing a progress. But I think it's still nice because other tools don't really show you a progress when you're building at all. So I find it helpful to get a sense of how long it will take until it's built. So nice thing about the Radon is that it has its own cache for the builds that you're making. So if you're actually also developing in your in console, or using terminal, or using other tools like Expo or whatever, then those builds that you're making there, they won't actually interfere with the builds that Radon is making. So once we build that, and then we restart the Android next time it will use the cached build because it knows it also keeps track of like what native changes needs to be made and so on. So for this, we actually use Expo fingerprint. So we use fingerprint to fingerprint the current version of the code, and then we know like what. I run the dev build, but there is no really good way of telling the difference now because it's just like all the same. But we can try closing the IDE, and now hopefully this will just use the previous build.
To clarify that question I had up there earlier, with it being able to use your development build, that should clarify, yes, Radon does work with Expo, as we used to call managed workflow, or using CNG. And even in this case where Krzysztof is building locally, he could git ignore his native project folders, and it's still a CNG project at that point. He's just running pre-build in order to build it for, in order to run it locally.
Yeah. So now once I open it again, it just uses the previous build. So this will launch just much quicker, thanks to the build caching. But yeah, as I said earlier, this is still like a local dev client build now. But yeah, all the other option with CNG, all that type of stuff, they work. I think we have it here in the compatibility table. Sure, if we use the Expo dev client, pre-built, and Expo Go across different SDK versions. So this is like a compatibility table. For React Native, we are not supporting 72 at the moment. There are chances that it may work for some people. When we started 72, we actually tested against 72 when we started the project, but now we no longer actually have it in our test suite, so that way we cannot really confirm that it's working. And for the monorepo setups, we still have some things missing. We actually have a PR ready that I think we'll merge it this week for PNPM. And brownfield projects are pretty complex to get right, because they tend to have like very like the number of different customization in the setup is like so wide that it's very difficult to get those type of projects running. So we have mixed success working with some clients using it on the brownfield apps. So like, for example, IDE works okay with the Expensify app, which is brownfield. But like the one thing that it's required is for the app to use React Native like early in the initialization phase, because we try to connect with debugger, and only once we are connected, then we can tell like, hey, we already successfully launched the app. So if you have a brownfield app, but it uses React Native on some screens in the middle somewhere in your app, then that's not going to be helpful, because unless you navigate to those screens, you won't initialize React Native, and the debugger won't connect, and so on and so forth. So brownfield is pretty tricky, and we don't have immediate plans on supporting those. But as I said, like, people have also mixed success with some brownfield apps that are out there.
Cool. Yeah, let's grab a few questions here as we're wrapping up here. We have, I think you demonstrated a good example here of using fingerprint. I don't know if we can answer the full. Is Expo fingerprint? What are the advantage of it? Is probably a difficult question to answer in whole. But I think you showed an example here where if you need to precisely tell what native version of something you're running, and that trying to summarize that and all that information, all those possible changes into one place. This is a pretty good example of using that. Yeah, I'm not sure if you have anything to add there, but that was a pretty cool example to see actually that you guys were using fingerprint for that. So if folks are interested in that workflow, it's experimental right now, but we recommend folks give it a try and give us feedback on fingerprint if it's useful for you in determining when you need a native build versus when you just need an update or that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the fingerprint is we use it for this banner that I was showing, the native dependency change. So we actually calculate fingerprint in every 10 seconds or so, or every 30 seconds, and then we check whether it's changed or not. So we use it for this, and we also use it for caching local builds. So whenever you actually build it locally, then we use fingerprint as a hash key for this. But also, yeah, I'm not sure if EIS actually supports, getting a build by a fingerprint, or this isn't supported, right?
Well, we have like an experimental fingerprint runtime version, so you could create like a basically differentiate what your like EAS updates are compatible with, which builds are compatible with by fingerprint. It's still early on. We're working on some iterations of that workflow. I think the kind of use that Krzysztof demonstrates here is probably the biggest value add right now is to like have something that's kind of that canary in the coal mine that like warns you there might be a native change, because maybe it'll be a little bit more sensitive than you want, but it's erring on the side of that it thinks there's native changes. So we're going to warn you to refresh. So that's the kind of probably the most useful way to use it right now, I would say.
Yeah, last one part of the demo, if we still have time. Just open the Blue Sky app.
Oh sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it's React Native, so it works in the IDE. And as a fun exercise, we can use some of the features to actually navigate through the code base here. So there's this butterfly logo that is defined here, and yeah, it's just like very easy to discover this. Otherwise, like how would you actually approach it in like a React Native app where you just like build it, fetch it, build it, and how do you find it, right? So we can change it to something else. Maybe let's. Oops, where is my mouse? Oh, because that's because I'm in the full screen mode here. Yeah. We can just try changing it to something,
apropos of nothing. Change it to a bird.
How do I get a bird now? In SVG. Yeah, so let's try it. Saving it like that. Okay, it's actually there, but it's very tiny. Oops. So we can. Oops. Can do with white. It's not. It should be style, right? Right, and then make it a bit bigger.
There you go.
I don't know, what should we use? 20.
That's good, bigger.
That looks familiar. Yeah. It's more familiar. All right. We can make a patch with this. All right. There's a lot of changes. I don't know why.
See if that PR gets accepted. That's really, I mean, it's a kind of a cool confluence. You've got Radon IDE here, and you've got, Blue Sky, this big open source React Native app that's coming to scene that. And this is like a neat way you could actually explore a large scale production app. Not just by going straight into code, but actually going visually through the component tree.
Yeah. This is like my favorite thing, very much, because I also have some web projects, or maybe even just the UI that is here. It's like a web-based UI, so I tend to right click everywhere now, and I try to have this, but it's just only in Radon apparently. So I really want to have that on a web as well. It's like very, very handy.
Awesome.
Yeah, do we have any questions? I'm feeling like I'm
we'll give a couple,
pretty much done with the demo.
Yeah. Does it need more computing power?
Does it need more computing power? It uses slightly more CPU than if you have it running in like a stock simulator, but compared to Android emulator, it's not. The difference is not as much. So the thing is that the iOS simulator have the kind of screen streaming. It's like very optimized, which is something that we need. So this is like the biggest kind of overhead that we're doing here, is that in order to put it inside of the VS Code, it actually needs to have a way of setting up the streaming in a way that VS Code can consume that. And the only option in VS Code to build extensions that have visual elements is by using web technology. So this is like a web view that's kind of inside of your VS Code, and it needs to kind of consume this video stream. So thankfully on Macs, we have this is like a hardware accelerated, because it's like a kind of video compression. So it's heavily accelerated on hardware. So it takes I think around like 12% CPU more than you would actually have on. And this is like for a single CPU. So if you have like 8 cores, then that's like almost nothing. So it takes some more CPU. When you have Android, it's actually very comparable, because Android actually has a whole Android emulator. It's like a separate emulated operating system, and it also has streaming set up in order to just display the Android emulator on screen. So we are using that very similar techniques that Android emulator is using, in which case we don't actually have a lot of overhead. It's like very minimal and almost nothing. So this overhead is due to encoding the video and then decoding it in VS Code, and we're also like actively working on optimizing that. So hopefully we'll also have some improvements as far as that. But for me, this isn't really noticeable.
Cool. I think that answers the question, which we did cover earlier, is that the IDE viewers are based on the actual simulators or emulators that are installed on your system via Xcode or Android Studio.
Yeah, so the devices you run it on, those are your local, emulator or simulators that run on your device. There is no, networking or cloud-based emulators or nothing like that. So everything is, just built locally on your computer and runs on your computer.
Cool. And to wrap it up here, we got a couple people asking about pricing. If there's any, I guess if you could summarize the pricing, if there's any certain
of course.
deals for different audiences, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So for now, the pricing is like very simple. So we have a 30 days trial. So you can just give it a go and try it for yourself. And there is a individual license, which is 90 USD, and then there's a business license for 29, which is aiming for companies, and it also has the license manager associated with the account, so you can have multiple seats purchased under this license. So we only have this in this model. So we also have the yearly plan, which is like 10 times instead of 12, so you save 16%, as mentioned here. And so this is how the pricing is currently structured.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. I think that's a wrap today. Thank you so much, Krzysztof, for showing us Radon IDE. Everybody can check it out. Look up, Google Radon IDE, or it's ide.swmansion.com. I think I got that right.
Yep.
And of course, as you mentioned too, the State of React Native survey. Encourage everybody to fill that out, and we had a link in the chat for that as well. Any parting words before we go?
I mean, again, as you mentioned already, I wanted to remind about the survey. So it's really something that a lot of people are paying attention in the community, like Meta, Expo, and they're reading those results and getting insights from it. So it's really important. More people feel it. It's more kind of representative, and it gives us better insights on the state of React Native. That's the name of the survey, and that's the kind of the reason why we're running it, right? To get a sense of how this state look like.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Krzysztof. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today and with your great questions as well. I think that is our last Expo live stream of the year. So stay tuned. We'll have more episodes coming in 2025. Catch y'all later.
Thank you so much for having me, and see you around.